think he graduated.
Yeah, but I graduated from high school in 55.
Okay, I'm going to do a little short introduction to tell them what this is. It just introduces us.
Okay. Am I supposed to look at her?
Okay. My name is Deanda Johnson. I'm interviewing Mrs. Margaret McNairy at her home here in Zanesville, Ohio, on June 26, 2000. 2026, 2007, for the African American presence in the Ohio River Valley Oral History Project. July, did I say June?
Mm-hmm.
It's actually July 26, 2007. Thanks. Thank you very much for agreeing to be interviewed. I'm going to ask you some questions. We're going to start off with some background information. But if you could just answer in complete sentences. So if I say, what's your name, you say, my name is, because my voice is going to be cut off of the tape.
Okay.
The questions will be. We're going to start with a really easy question. What is your full name, and can you please spell it for us?
My name is Margaret Ann Robinson McNairy. MARGARETANN. Robinson, ROBINSON, and McNairy, McNairy.
Thanks. What is your date and place of birth?
I was born here in Zanesville, Ohio on January 21st, 1938.
And were you born at home or in a hospital?
I was born in a hospital here in Zanesville.
And what's the name of that hospital?
The name of the hospital was Good Samaritan Hospital.
What do you consider your family's ethnic or racial background to be?
We were called colored when I was born. We're Negroes.
Can you please tell me the name of your mother?
My mother's name was Hazel Tate Robinson.
And do you know when she was born?
She was born March the 4th, 1899.
And do you know where she was born?
She was born here in Zanesville.
And your father, can you please tell me his name?
My father's name was Booker Theodore Robinson. I don't know his birth date.
And do you know where he was born?
I have not been able to document where his birth is. I've heard from his relatives that he was born in Canada, but I've not been able to document that.
And how did your parents meet?
I don't know. I don't know how my parents met. That information was not shared.
Do you know approximately when they got married?
I remember their marriage. So I was born when they were not married.
Okay.
And I'm going to say I was 6 or 7 years old when they married, which would make that, what would be the year, from 38, maybe 1930,
45?
45, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm. Do you know why your parents waited to get married, or what the circumstances were?
That was never shared with me, what their circumstances were. But I do remember the evening, the night.
Oh, can you talk a little
Well,
bit about that?
my older sisters, I have 2 older sisters, and they dressed another sister and me up for this occasion. My mother and father were married in the Park Street Wesleyan Church, which is close to where we lived at the time. And we were to sit in a chair and wait for them to come back from the wedding. I mean, we didn't attend the wedding, but we were dressed up. I don't know why. We didn't go anywhere. But anyway.
Now, are your sisters do you and your older sisters have the same parents?
No, my mother was married before. Okay. This was, Booker Robinson was her second husband. So.
Do you know who her first husband was?
Yes, I do. His name was Maurice Corbett. He was from Iowa. I never knew him.
And how old were your sisters? Can you tell me your siblings' names and approximately when they were born?
Not when they were born. I suppose you could figure that out. But my oldest sister living in Dayton, Ohio is now 84. My second oldest sister living here in Zanesville is 82.
And can you tell me their names?
The oldest sister in Dayton is Betty Jean Corbett Stevens. And my sister living here in Zanesville is Juanita Bell Corbett Mitchell. I had an older brother whose name was also Corbett, who passed away suddenly 4 years ago, November of 2003.
So, are you the only child of your mother and father?
To my knowledge, I am the only child of my mother and father.
So you're the youngest then?
I have one younger. She's living, Cynthia Robinson is living in Atlanta, Georgia.
But she doesn't have the same mother and father as you?
She has the same mother.
Oh, okay. So your parents divorced?
Yes.
Oh, okay. When approximately did your parents divorce?
You know, that's not something that I've given a lot of thought to or even have a lot of recollection, I mean. Had to be in 70s maybe.
So were you grown?
I was grown.
Oh, okay.
I was grown.
Can you tell me your spouse's name?
Arnold Lejeune McNairy.
And where was he born?
He was born in St. Louis, Missouri, 1930.
And how did you guys meet?
Well, actually, in 1962, I went to Los Angeles, California, seeking a teaching position. I was a non-degreed person, but I was ambitious and kind of a risk taker. And I did not get a job in Los Angeles because I was not degreed. But I did work at the Los Angeles Board of Education as a clerk typist. And I met a girl there from the payroll department who was from St. Louis. And she said she had an uncle she wanted me to meet. So I'd visit back and forth in St. Louis, and I met him. I was still living in Zanesville. I mean, I came back to Zanesville to live, let me say it that way. And I decided to go out to St. Louis and teach out there if I could, after I graduated from Ohio University.
Do you remember when and where you got married?
We got married by the Justice of Peace at the courthouse in St. Louis on February the 14th, 1970.
So Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day.
Do you remember what you wore by any chance?
No.
No. Who was in attendance?
A friend of his, a longtime friend of his, and the friend's wife attended us.
And can you please tell me the names of your children?
My oldest daughter is Kelly Lynn McNairy Winston. My youngest daughter is Leanne McNairy.
And when and where were they born?
They were both born in St. Louis, Missouri. Kelly was born in April of 1971, and Leanne was born in February of 1974.
And can you talk a little bit about your schooling? Where did you attend elementary school?
I attended elementary school here in Zanesville, McIntyre Elementary, then on to Roosevelt Junior High, and then Zanesville High School. I'm a graduate of Zanesville High School in 1955.
And were the schools that you attended segregated or integrated?
They were all three of the schools were integrated.
And what was your experience like going to an integrated school?
As far as I could tell, it was fairly normal. The neighborhood in which I lived was an integrated neighborhood. We were probably of the low middle class. Everyone living there, both the blacks, the whites, and the mixed races. The school was made up of that same grouping, but it also had an element of the upper middle and the upper class who also attended the school. So all economic groups went to that elementary, junior high, and high school.
Now, where did you live growing up in Zanesville?
Started off on a little street called Fulton Street until I was 7 or 8 years old, and then we moved to what was called the 8th Ward, still is, and lived there until I left to go to St. Louis.
And you mentioned that you attended, where did you attend college?
It's interesting. I never thought when I entered high school that I would be able to go to college. I mean, my family was, well, it just was never discussed. College was never discussed. But I had a high school teacher who used to say to me, "Are you going to go to college?" And I would say, "I would love to go." And he said, "Where would you like to go?" And I said, "I'd love to go to Ohio State." And I was thinking strictly of Big Ten football, which made me say Ohio State. Before I knew it, I was at Ohio State in the fall of 1955. I went there for 1 year, could not afford to go back. And I transferred to Ohio University here in Zanesville, worked during the day, went to Ohio University in the evening. Took a long time to complete my studies. And then I had to spend, it was OU ruling, I had to spend some time on that campus. So I finally graduated in '68.
So you attended, they offered classes here in Zanesville?
Yes, it's called OUZ, Ohio University Zanesville. But I also had to do some driving down to Ohio University to get campus hours. For some reason, there had to be some hours in which I was on the main campus. And I did that.
Do you remember what the racial climate was like here at OU Zanesville when you went?
I didn't notice any difference between the racial climate at OUZ than at Zanesville High School. Didn't really have a lot of problems, although there was some segregating here in Zanesville.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, the movie houses were segregated, and even though I grew up in an integrated neighborhood and had white friends, mixed race friends, which I still have today, or whom I still have today, when it came time to going to the movie houses, I had to go upstairs. All blacks went upstairs, and the white students or their friends or whomever were downstairs. I didn't think a lot about that, and I didn't get angry about those kinds of things until I got older. There were some establishments on Main Street, Zanesville, that had signs posted, white only, and you just obeyed, white only. There was a skating rink here in which blacks could only go on Monday night, and that was the night reserved for us. There was some segregation going on.
How about in employment here in Zanesville? Was there a difference between places that whites and blacks could gain employment?
I didn't hear people discuss that a lot. When I was growing up, I had odd jobs. I worked in the department store here in Zanesville.
What was the department store?
Weber's department store. And he wanted me to stay in the back. You know, I had to stay in the back to do what I was doing, and I protested that. He knew my grandparents and had a great deal of respect for them and used to tease me about, "I'm going to talk to your grandparents about your sassiness," or whatever. But I didn't. I worked on the floor. But I think employment, we as a race of people seem to always have the lower paying jobs. There's no question about that. That's just the way it was.
Now, what did your father do for a living when you were growing up?
He worked for Armco Steel for many, many years. Somewhat of an angry man, and I think he probably faced a lot of segregation on where he worked. He would be angry and would complain about it. He was also a man who was a gifted painter and paper hanger, and did a lot of work in homes in Zanesville, hanging paper, and a talented man with gardening. He just had those skills.
Do you remember when he passed away?
1978. He died here in, my mother and he were already, parted. I used to come and talk to him. I brought my oldest daughter for him to see. Basically a lonely man, an unhappy man. And what he died of, it was never shared.
Do you remember how he was as a father growing up? How was he?
Detached. He didn't seem that interested. He was a very bright man, I could tell that. And sometimes we would get in discussions about religion. This is when I was older. Kind of stayed away from him when I was a kid. Except at Christmas time, he was like a little Santa Claus and would bring candy and stuff in. But I guess I was a little bit afraid of him, if I was to be perfectly honest. But I did enjoy a lot of our talks as I got older. And I could tell he was a bright man.
Okay, going back to a little bit about your OU experience, what was your major when you were at OU?
Elementary education. And I thought my experience at OUZ, Ohio University, Zanesville, was a good one. I enjoyed some of the instructors down on the campus, especially those in the English department. I enjoyed them. I lived in a dormitory, and this was one of my more unpleasant experiences at Ohio University, and this is 1964. And I was placed in a dorm room with two other young ladies, both white girls, one from Columbus and one from Michigan. And we got to be good friends. And then about mid-year, the dorm resident assistant, I guess that's what she was called, came to me to talk to me and said, "You're going to have to move out of this room." And I said, "Oh." And the parents of one of the girls does not want the daughter living with a black girl. And by this time, the civil rights movement was getting full swing, and I'm old enough now to recognize when things are just not right. And I said to this woman, "You're going to have her move. I'm not going anywhere." And of course that created a little problem for the school. But when the girls came home, I said, I got a visit from the resident assistant. And she told me that the parents of one of you does not want you living with me. And this one girl spoke up and she said, "It was my parents." She said, "Don't go away." Well, the parents threatened to take her out of the school if I was not moved. And she protested. She said, let them take me out. To this day, July 20, whatever this is, 2007, we still communicate. We still communicate. At Christmas time, we've exchanged pictures of our grandkids. And we talk about that, many, many years ago.
Now, how do you feel that the civil rights movement impacted your life here in Zanesville, or to what extent if it at all did it?
Heightened my awareness of the problems, excuse me, with the races. Even though problems existed in Zanesville, I had enough white friends to realize that there was good in all people. So I was not forming a negative attitude about white people because I had friends. They stayed all night at my house. I stayed at their house. We were buddies. We were pals. We got along. But I became very angry when I saw what was happening around the world, particularly in the South. And I wanted to do something about it. I didn't want to go on a bus and ride to Selma, but I felt if I could get in a situation in teaching where my students would be predominantly white, I could influence positively those young minds without them really, and introduce them to black people who were good people and accomplished people. So.
Now, how do you feel, what was the perception of the civil rights movement here in Zanesville? Do you remember how it was reported in the news or different things when you were growing up?
I don't remember. I really and truly do not remember much being reported. And that probably was as deliberate when I think back to the people who had the Times Recorder, some of whom my people worked for as domestics. And listening to them talk about some of their attitudes. Probably that was deliberate. Just keep the news. We're getting along here in Zanesville. Just keep it quiet. They don't need to know. But when television came out and news started to spread, and easy access to it, I don't know that Zanesville was that affected even then. This is an interesting place, Zanesville, Ohio. Oh dear.
What are some of the first images you remember seeing of the civil rights movement?
The dogs attacking my people in the South, and the hoses. Pictures of the hangings, that Emmett Till thing in particular. The burnings of homes, crosses placed in yards. The Ku Klux Klan, that silliness with robes, and I didn't understand that kind of hatred. I really didn't.
Now, was the Ku Klux Klan here in Zanesville?
I don't know. I've heard, growing up there would be Ku Klux Klan around here, but I didn't know who they were. What are they talking about? The Ku Klux Klan is in Zanesville or in Somerset or in New Lexington. I never saw any white cloaked people running around setting fire to things.
Did you belong to any organizations when you were going to school, or clubs, or did you participate?
You mean at high school?
In high school or in college?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
I was pretty active. I was a member of the student council. This is in high school. I was a member of IFCA, which is a Future Teachers Organization, the Red Cross, which I'm still a volunteer for. I don't know. I was very athletic. When I went to Ohio State, my first year, I was involved in athletic programs, intercollegiate basketball, volleyball, softball. Although the women then did not play the kind of volleyball and basketball. I would never have been a WNBA person. Not so much at OhioUniversity. I was in and out of OhioU, and I was primarily on the Zanesville campus. So I was not really active in too many organizations at OhioUniversity.
So can you talk a little bit about your occupation that you had after graduating from college?
Teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Teaching was a passion with me. It's something I did for 41 years, and I loved doing it. I began in Dayton, Ohio as a substitute teacher, but I worked the entire year. And I was a fourth grade teacher, and some of the students were too much older than I was, seemed like. But I leaned heavily on the older teachers who were my mentors and observing them, listening to them. But I seemed to have a knack for teaching, and I loved it. After being in Dayton for 3 years, I just decided I'm going to California and teach. And drove out there with my sister and 2 young, the niece and nephew. It was crazy. I did not teach there. But I did know some people in the administrative department here in Zanesville. And after being out in Los Angeles a couple of years, I called back here and said, I'm coming home and I'd like to teach. And I got a job as a first grade teacher at Monroe Elementary School here in Zanesville. And enjoyed that very much. And then I decided I was going to St. Louis. My friend had moved back to St. Louis, so I went there in 1968 after I graduated from Ohio University. And it was an interesting experience for me. I had never been in a school system where it was predominantly black. In fact, it was all black. And that was a new experience, and I thought an unnatural experience. St. Louis school system was sort of segregated. All blacks seemed to be on the north side of the city and all whites on the south side. We did have a couple of white teachers at our school. And I said, something's not right here. You know, my class was all black. That was a new experience for me. I didn't like it. And I asked to be transferred to an integrated school. And St. Louis was a little bit slow integrating its schools, but in '71 I did go to a more integrated school, not necessarily, I mean the percentages were predominantly in favor of the white people still living in the area. And then I got a call after doing that for 2 years to go into the gifted program on the south side of St. Louis. And I thought, oh boy, this is going to be fun. And that's what I did. And I had parents, I'll never forget my first September being assigned to the gifted program. The lineup of parents who were curious to see me, you know. They had all kinds of curiosities about who is this black woman coming down here. But St. Louis was also trying to balance their staffs out more, get more black teachers on the south side, more white teachers on the north side. It was a good experience for all of us involved. And everything about teaching has been an experience, both learning, emotional, whatever. I enjoyed it. Now my last 11 years, believe it or not, the most affluent school district in Missouri, Ladue School District, still was a little slow getting minorities into its schools. And I was at a luncheon involving school administrators. And this man said to me, have you ever thought about teaching in Ladue? No. He was the superintendent of schools. He said, come out to Ladue. I thought, oh dear, I had so many years in St. Louis, 24 by that time. And I thought, you know, you get kind of cocky after so many years and you get pretty confident. And I said, I am not interested in your school district. Why? Is the government after you people? You don't have enough black teachers? And he laughed about that. We became friends. I went to Ladue. I spent my last, they offered me a bigger salary. And that was my first experience working in a district of affluence. And I do mean affluence. And that turned out to be a good experience.
How so?
Parents were very supportive of me. Not all of them. Over the years, there were some who were not. But the child of an affluent family I concluded, has the very same problems as the child from the poor families when certain basic needs are not met, their safety, their love, and so forth. So I found that true among the affluent. So that experience that I had prior to going into the affluent helped me very much. I liked working with educated parents. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. And I liked working with smart kids. That didn't mean that I would turn my back on the others, because most of my experience were with kids who struggled in school. But it was absolutely wonderful working with the bright.
Probably another 10 minutes. We should change the battery if I keep going.
Okay. You were talking about, sorry, just
Experience with the
the
affluent.
kid. What are some of the changes that you saw? You taught for 41 years. What are some of the positive changes you saw, and what are some of the negative changes you saw?
I think the negative would be easier changes that I saw. Children became, over the years, less and less respectful of teachers, of their own parents, of one another, which was very difficult for me to cope with. Children seemed, as I got close to the end of my career, like they were floating. No real purpose. Almost, some of them seemed like they were absolutely soulless. And that would be a whole different story to get into. And that was disturbing. The kids were more, it's almost as if they felt they were privileged. And I don't mean, you know, at the end of my career I was with children who were very privileged kids. But it's like everybody owes me whatever. The work attitude decreased considerably. They didn't feel there was a reason to work. School was, for the most part, not interesting to them unless you were entertaining them. That was not all the kids. There were some. Parents expected teachers to give more to their children on an individual basis. I mean, parents didn't care that there were children other than their own in the classroom, and they wanted you to spend most all of the attention with that. I saw a lot of that selfishness and me, I kind of thing, which was disturbing. I was not used to that with kids. That was the big change. Positive, a lot of bright kids, a lot of hope for the future of this country that I could see in young people, a lot of caring kids, a lot of kids who wanted to see the races get along. I like that attitude. That was very positive.
You mentioned that when you first started teaching, you didn't have a degree. Was that unusual for the time?
No, Zanesville, coming out of high school in 1955, there was a shortage of teachers in Ohio. So the colleges were looking at some of their most hopeful people in the field of education, or who had decided or declared they were going to go into education, and offered a 2-year program called the Cadet Teaching Program. And during that time, you followed a particular course of study, which included your student teaching. And then you were sent to a classroom. You had to stay in school, continue taking classes until you eventually got your degree. But there were quite a few teachers during that year, young people who went into teaching, were there for a couple of years, and then they were in a classroom. Your older teachers were your mentors. You worked with college instructors where you shared what was happening each day. So that's what that was.
Okay, I'm going to turn back a little bit to your family history. When growing up in Zanesville, did your family own the property, rent, or what was your kind of economic situation?
My parents owned the property. Well, they were buying the property and eventually owned it. Yes.
And growing up, what did your mother do for a living?
My mother was a domestic, worked in the homes of some of Zanesville's affluent people. She also was a caterer, an outstanding cook, and she did a lot of that for people in town.
Now, did she remain in Zanesville her entire life?
Yes,
Okay.
she did remain in Zanesville.
And growing up, what kinds of food did you eat? What was the diet like?
Mostly boiled foods. Boiled cabbage, a lot of vegetables, a lot of fruits, a lot of fish. Now, we were non-Catholic, but we observed fish on Fridays that Catholics, I mean, they used to do that. On Sundays, it was roast beef. I never had barbecue until I went to St. Louis. Rice was a cereal. Never had rice as well as a vegetable with gravy or any of that until I went to St. Louis in 1968. But she did. She cooked a lot of fresh vegetables.
Now, was most of the food that the family ate purchased or grown?
During the summer, had beautiful farms, gardens. My father was top-notch at that garden. We were expected to work in the garden to pick the green beans and the tomatoes and all those fresh vegetables. And my mother canned a lot. The tomatoes and the green beans and beets and other vegetables.
And did you have outdoor, indoor plumbing growing up?
The house on Jackson Street, there was outdoor plumbing for just a very short time. And then my father and mother worked to get the plumbing put in, the pipes and all that had to be done, the house on Jackson Street. Yeah.
So what year was that?
Hmm?
What year would that have been that you guys got indoor plumbing?
Well, it was after the war, which was 45, so I'm going to say about 48, 49.
How about electricity?
Always had electricity. We always did.
Growing up, did your family make or purchase most of the clothing that was worn?
My mother could sew a little. She made a few things, but most of the clothes were purchased.
And where from? Where did you guys purchase most of the clothing?
There was a little store in town operated by a Jewish family, I think called Artwell. I'm not sure about that name. But downtown stores. I mean, we just seemed to have, I didn't realize I, was poor. I suppose I could be classified as poor, but we had the coats, the shoes, the boots, whatever.
Do you remember what the fashion was like growing up?
Only as a teenager with the broomstick skirts.
What can you describe?
And the broomstick skirts and the black and white saddle Oxfords and the bobby socks. And the loafers, the penny loafers. I was not really fashion conscious. Couldn't afford to be now. Not like today and these young people today. No. I looked okay, I guess.
Now, how did you, as a young person, earn money to purchase things? Like, did you get an allowance, or did you have to work? Did you have chores? How did you earn money growing up?
You know what? I don't remember us getting allowances, but I always worked somewhere doing something. I too took a job from the time I was in junior high school working as a domestic. I would go after school and wash dishes for the families. Got to the point where I was cooking for the families, leaving high school and going to individual homes and cooking the meals and cleaning up. Worked on Saturday. I always had some kind of job.
Now, you mentioned domestic work. You and your mother both worked. Was it common for African American women to have domestic?
Very common among the African American women in Zanesville to be a domestic.
were there any other employment opportunities for Black women, or was that the only one that was open to?
Well, you know, I did see some women, and they were fair-skinned, working in a department store in Zanesville. But no, I didn't see African Americans in florist, you know, working in florist positions. Or I say florist because I think of how some women wanted to do that kind of work because they like flowers. But most of our people were domestics, unfortunately. If they aspired to be something other than a domestic, it was not shared. I didn't hear complaints. Mm-hmm. It was almost like this is what is expected of me, of us. You know, when I got older and I look back, why didn't you people ever protest? I mean, why didn't you say something? Why did you allow yourselves? Why didn't you do this? But it's interesting, in spite of the limited opportunities for employment in Zanesville, so many African American people went on to achieve. You know, they did aspire for something greater.
Were they domestics enough? How did the affluent people in Zanesville make the money to afford domestics? Was it only affluent people? Was it middle class?
No, just the affluent. Well, you know, Zanesville, this area was a big pottery making area. So these people were presidents of potteries.
The microphone's wedged in your shirt there.
What you want me? What
No,
shirt?
it's fine now.
Is it okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Presidents of pottery companies, tile companies. They had a big eggplant here. The Brockway glass was here. And so these were people of, and then as I said, the Times Recorder was headed by a man that my mother worked for. I guess these people had money.
Now, growing up, what neighborhood were the neighborhoods of Zanesville? Was there a portion of town or a center of town where mostly Blacks lived, or were they just...
The 8th Ward was where a lot of Blacks lived. And then on Putnam Hill, and I don't know what those wards were, there were certain areas on what was called Putnam Hill where Blacks lived. So there were really two areas which were predominantly Black. I say predominantly because whites lived there too.
Now, where's the 8th Ward located?
Well, if you would go from here, it's south of what would be considered McIntyre, Blue Avenue. I don't know what the boundaries are, but the 8th Ward is like Lee Street and Amelia Street, or up to what would be McIntyre Avenue. I don't really know what the boundaries are. I never thought about it.
Now, what were some of the Black-owned businesses here in Zanesville? Were there any Black?
I remember a Mr. Don Baker who owned a funeral parlor, and he was the only Black mortician in this town. And I don't remember when he left this town. And it was a long time before there was a Black mortician here again, until Mr. Burrell came here recently. But store owners, little stores, small stores, I remember that.
Do you remember the names of any of them?
The Walker's little store, the Black barber shops. As I said, the mortician, Don Baker.
How about restaurants? Were there any Black-owned restaurants?
Taverns. Not restaurants that I can recall. That doesn't mean that there weren't any. Bars.
Do you remember which ones?
There used to be Well, I don't know if it was black-owned or not. There used to be a bar called the CW, Colored and White. And it was frequented by both black and white. But, you know, maybe that wasn't owned by, I don't want to be quoted on that, maybe that wasn't owned by blacks. I used to go to a couple when I got older, a couple of places that black guys had, but not for a very long time. Jones, there's a Mr. Jones. I think he still has a place here in Zanesville.
So what other activities did young people do for fun when you were growing up? What were some of the activities?
Going to baseball games, local baseball. A lot of our young boys played in the Zanesville Babe Ruth Leagues and what they call the Zanesville Legion Leagues. And I had a nephew that was involved in sports. I'm very into sports, so I have always enjoyed the sports aspect here. Going skating on Monday nights. It's not a place where there was, you know, so much to do here. It still isn't. But and then going back and forth to different ones' houses, you know, your friends' houses. You entertained in the houses.
Negro League growing up here in Zanesville?
The baseball Negro League?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, okay. Because
No.
the Zanesville Grays were already gone by time?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
I didn't really get into learning about the Negro League until I got out in St. Louis. And Satchel Paige was from St. Louis, and then I got interested. What was this all about?
How about church? What religion was your family?
Baptist, born and raised in a Baptist church, and attended Union Baptist Church here in Zanesville.
Where's that located?
On 8th Street, South 8th Street here in Zanesville.
Now, was that a primarily black or
It
integrated?
it was primarily a black church. Anyone could attend, and maybe sometimes my little friends would go to Sunday school. I mean, it didn't matter, but it's predominantly black.
Do you know how the church's history, when was it organized, how old it is?
Well, I have that written down. I don't have it in my head. It's been part of my research I've been doing, but the Union Baptist Church has been around for a long time.
Now, growing up, how regularly did you attend church?
Whenever I was made to, you know. I really didn't like Sunday school. Church was okay if they had nice choirs singing, but I was embarrassed, I guess, afterwards because I interviewed the minister over at Union Baptist just since I've been home, and I said, here's where I attended Sunday school. I never really liked Sunday school.
Now, what activities, besides you mentioned Sunday school, were there other activities associated with attending church?
Not for me. If there were other activities, I did not participate. When I was older and taught in Dayton, I was actually baptized in the Union Baptist Church in Dayton, Ohio, and I became very active. I was sort of a teacher in one of the youth groups, and I enjoyed that okay.
Do you think, how did religion influence behavior? Did it influence dress or diet or leisure? How did it influence family life? Did it put like certain constraints on behavior growing up?
I don't know if it was religion that did that for me. I think there was a fear there. You know, my grandparents were people who believed that children had a place. I mean, they were people, I think, of high moral character. No back talk, no sound. There's just certain things were expected of you. The way you sat, the way you addressed your parents and grandparents. And it was never discussed. This is what we expect of you. So, and then my mother was the same way. She didn't allow dancing. She didn't allow card playing. My father, because he loved the yard so much, he thought we would blight the entire area by our presence if we were not tried not to be as or if we were not as attractive as the flowers and things that were in the yard. So I thought that was kind of funny. One thing that is kind of funny, my grandfather, whom I adored, and he's the one who first got me interested in baseball. We used to go to the games. Zanesville had a team called the Zanesville Indians that played on that municipal stadium on the grounds that were Nelson T. Gantt's property. And he was a big Cincinnati Reds fan. And he also liked beer. And he would hide it down in the basement because my grandmother, you just did not bring beer into the house. But he would get a bottle of Burger beer and he would call us down. I'm going to show you the new coal furnace or whatever. And we would beg him for a taste of the beer. And that was my first time.
How old were you?
Oh my guys, 10, 11, 12 years old. And my grandmother knew what was going on. She'd yell down to the basement, "Get those kids upstairs, what's going on down there?" He said, "Don't you tell your grandmother," but I think she knew all along.
You mentioned, if you could talk about how different, do you remember, you talked about a little bit how the civil rights, do you remember other big world events and how they affected your life, like World War II?
I was afraid as a young child because my parents turned the radio on every evening to listen to the world news. And there was an announcer called Morgan Beatty. And he would...
We got 9 minutes.
He would always come on, "This is Morgan Beatty, bringing you the news of the world. Tonight, Japan." And I was afraid. I was so afraid. And no one explained what was going on. But the man's voice frightened me a lot. So we used to have blackouts here in Zanesville, in which all lights in the city would be turned out. I mean, be completely blackened. And it was later on that I learned why. In case there were enemy bombers above, they wouldn't be able to see their targets below. I was always afraid. I remember when the war ended. So I'd have been, 45, 3, 2, 9, 4, 1, 2, 3, about 7 years old. And the jubilation in Zanesville, just people dancing in the streets. And I danced in the streets, not knowing why I was dancing in the streets, but other kids were doing it. We were just all very happy. I remember when the atom bomb was dropped, and I thought, how horrible, how horrible. So many people killed.
Did you guys have the drills in school?
We had drills. We had air raid drills. I can remember that. And that was all terribly frightened. Maybe I grew up to be an insecure person. There were so many things going on that frightened me. Oh, dear, dear, dear. But
was there rationing? Do you remember rationing?
Yeah, I can remember rationing when my father would get a book. And on that book, there were little stamps in which we could purchase sugar or flour or whatever. Just remember a little of that. My older sisters recall that more. But my mother was one of these people who was very proud, as was my grandmother. And I don't want them giving us anything. They just really didn't like taking things from others, like we were the charity cases. I remember a little.
You mentioned your grandparents. Who were your mother's parents?
William Henry Tate and Hattie Starks Tate were my mother's parents.
And do you know where they were born?
My grandfather was born right here in Zanesville in 1872. My grandmother was born here, but her people came from North Carolina. And she was born about 6 years after my grandfather.
Do you know how your grandfather's family got to Ohio?
I'm learning that now. His father, Caleb Tate, came from Pennsylvania. His grandfather, Colby Tate, born in 1796, was in Virginia and went from Virginia to Pennsylvania, and then in 1850 showed up right here in Meigs Township.
Do you know how he gained his freedom?
There were no black slaves among the Tate men. And the reason why I'm coming to learn and can document, in 1685, there was a black man by the name of James Tate who married a white woman who was an indentured servant who came from Europe. And I don't know that I'd want to be quoted on the law yet because it's not clear to me yet. Even though that marriage was frowned upon, one of the advantages of this black man marrying a white woman who had a higher status in this country, even though she herself was an indentured servant, was that their children would be free. Every Tate born from that point on was a free black man. But if he happened to be in southern states, or even some of the middle Atlantic states, Maryland, Virginia, he had to register and carry papers indicating that he was a free black man. Some were even told to leave the state or they would be sent to a farm or to a plantation. So the Tate men, to my knowledge, were all free men. So my grandfather's grandfather and his father, Caleb, came here free men. Came here, meaning here to Zanesville.
Do you know the name of the indentured servant?
Hester was her name. Her name was Hester, never got her last name.
And was the man she married, which would be your great-great-great?
It goes back, my grandfather is the fourth of the Tate men. It would go back, I don't know how, to James, what his relationship to my grandfather would be. It would take somebody who can figure out those relationships better than I can. I need a program that figures all that out.
So was